Hello, America. I'm Mark Levin. This is Life, Liberty, and Levin. We have a great guest, Byron York. Good to see you.
Thank you for having me, Mark.
Washington Examiner columnist, expert in most things.
Absolutely.
Well, Byron York, Moses has spoken. He came down from Mount Sinai, and he's handed us not 2 tablets, but over 400 pages. Now, half of the report, Volume 1, this half right here, President of the United States, Trump world, Trump campaign, Trump White House, was not colluding with the Russians. In fact, nobody was colluding with the Russians. Not a single American, he says. Tell me, why do we need 200 pages to tell us that? And moreover, how did we get involved in an investigation, which in the end turned out to be nothing?
Well, when this report came out, I thought about something that happened just a couple of weeks ago. The president went to Capitol Hill, met with Republicans, wide-ranging conversation, but when it turned to the Trump-Russia investigation, by all accounts, the president referred to it as 2 years of BS. He used the whole word. And I think the Mueller report kind of confirms that that's really true. It started with a very serious accusation leveled by Democrats against the Trump campaign, that the Trump campaign had conspired with Russia to try to fix the election. Now remember, we were in kind of uncharted territory back in 2016. I remember going to the Democratic convention, and we're getting news reports of these emails from the DNC that have come out, and they're kind of sowing some discord between the Hillary campaign and the Bernie campaign. And then later in the year, in October, just before the election, of course, the John Podesta emails came out. So, I mean, something funky was going on. There's no doubt about that. But this connection, this accusation that Trump was having something to do with it, that he was part of a conspiracy, is this accusation that got the whole thing started. And we know now, not from Mueller, but from Devin Nunes and others who have looked into this, that there were a bunch of people kind of pushing the idea that there was a Trump-Russia conspiracy. The intelligence and law enforcement agencies of the United States kind of got carried away with it. And by January of 2017, just 2 weeks before President Trump is sworn in, he's the president-elect, you have the director of the FBI in a one-to-one briefing with the president-elect telling him, we know about you and prostitutes in Moscow. I mean, just crazy stuff. And basically, Democrats, who do have a huge media advantage, were able to leverage this into kind of a big controversy and something that ultimately became almost a frenzy. And in May of 2017, you have what I think we've seen happen before, which is top officials in the Justice Department just panicked and appointed a special prosecutor. Rod Rosenstein, in this case, appointed Mueller the special prosecutor. I think we saw it years ago in the CIA leak case. I think maybe a number of your viewers might remember that. That's when there was this idea that the Bush administration, George W. Bush's White House, had exposed, blown the cover of a CIA spy. You had some of the same people involved, like Charles Schumer, screaming that there must be an investigation, there must be a special prosecutor, and the Justice Department kind of panicked, and they appointed one, and led to a multi-year investigation. And we found out later that they knew at the very beginning who had leaked this name.
I want to unravel some of this with you. No collusion. It's essentially being ignored by much of the media. CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, all the rest of them. It's a big deal. The president said from day one, there is no collusion. People around him said from day one, there is no collusion. And yet, top echelon of the FBI, parts of the Department of Justice, you had former intelligence chiefs, Brennan and Clapper, all over TV. President was called treasonous, said he was doing Vladimir Putin's bidding. He was called a spy. He was called all these things, and not just by pedestrians, by people who served in the Obama administration. You had an interview with McCabe on 60 Minutes where he assumed, claimed that the President of the United States was all clogged up with the Russians. They were talking about the 25th Amendment. They were talking about what they were going to do about it. And you have a FISA application, a warrant issued, based in part on the dossier of an opposition campaign. The Obama government, federal law enforcement, federal intelligence, aspects of it, all geared up on collusion. There's no collusion. Are any of them going to be held to account? The Democrats in the House have no interest in this anymore. They moved on to part 2 of the report, which we'll get to later.
This is the world's biggest never mind. I mean, it's astonishing. First of all, we've known this for quite a long time, that there was no collusion, that Mueller was not going to allege it, because we saw Mueller really didn't leak very much, but he did charge people. He indicted people, he tried them, he got their guilty pleas, and he indicted or charged big figure after big figure, Manafort, Gates, Flynn, Papadopoulos, Cohen, and others who were in the Trump circle in the campaign. And he charged them with various things, like Manafort charging him with basically not paying taxes years earlier. And the others, some he charged with lying to FBI investigators. But he never alleged that there was a conspiracy or coordination between the Trump campaign and Moscow. And you're thinking, well, if Paul Manafort, if there was this coordination and Paul Manafort wasn't involved, who was colluding here? So it's something that people in the press should have been able to see this whole time. So it's not really a mistake. And I was talking to John Dowd, who was the president's lawyer from right after the appointment of Mueller until March of 2018, and he felt that by Christmas of 2017 that Mueller had pretty much established that there was no collusion.
All right, let me stop you there. That's a big deal.
Yes.
That's over a year ago.
Correct.
Almost a year and a half ago. So why did Mueller wait?
That is a great question.
Why did Mueller wait to issue his report? Why didn't he go up to a microphone, which he could have, and announce to the American people with approval from the Deputy Attorney General at the time that there's no collusion, rather than all this tumult, the cloud hanging over the presidency and so forth? Mm-hmm. Why did he wait?
Good question. Remember that in December of 2017, there were some news stories that the White House kind of expected this would maybe be over very soon. Well, that was because they knew that Mueller had not established collusion. So what happens? Why does it go on? Mueller begins to chase this whole obstruction theory, and the obstruction theory is based on whatever Trump's state of mind is. So an interview, a questioning of Trump himself becomes a huge deal.
Now let me stop you. It says, so he knows pretty much by then, no collusion. Now he's focused on obstruction. Focused on obstruction, maybe get false statements out of the president, twist them, maybe get perjury out of a president, maybe flat-out obstruction out of a president. The president made many public statements. He was very angry, an innocent man being accused of being a spy, among other things. Why would Mueller pursue that rather than close it down?
What's baffling about this is, I mean, you can say maybe it was really the 13 angry Democrats or the 17 angry Democrats, that is his staff pushing him, but it's absolutely baffling, especially in light of the fact that the White House cooperated to an extraordinary degree with this. They offered all of the White House staff that Mueller wanted to talk to, they said, go talk to him, tell him everything, don't claim any privilege. And by the way, they didn't go to a grand jury. They just went over to Mueller's office and answered questions. So we heard a lot about Rule 6E and the grand jury material is secret. Well, that didn't apply to anything that the White House staff told. They also handed over millions and millions of documents. So this is happening under the surface at the time that the president does call the investigation a witch hunt. He talks about the angry Democrats. He says it's a hoax. But underneath the surface, he's cooperating and sending everything over there. And he thinks that that is going to convince Mueller that he is cooperative, that he's open, that he's transparent, and that once this conclusion is reached, that there was no collusion, then the whole thing can go away. What he didn't count on was that Mueller would get caught up in this obstruction frenzy.
And it's obvious the president and his team saw this as a dangerous possibility.
Yes.
Because they refused. The president wasn't going to be interviewed by Mueller. Now, Mueller could have issued a subpoena and try and force the president to come before a federal grand jury. He could have tested his powers. I've argued it wouldn't have flown, that no federal court would have agreed to that, certainly not the Supreme Court, because he didn't have the necessary predicate to be interviewing the president. In his report, this is the second part of the report. This is Volume 2. Volume 2, which the Democrats are focused on, having now rejected Volume 1, which is the collusion, which is what they charged to begin with. So I want to address this very thoroughly. So the President of the United States doesn't agree to be questioned, and shouldn't have. Agrees to answer questions in writing. But it says a lot. And what Mueller says in his report is, we were near the end of our investigation. This could have been a long period of litigation. We wanted to wrap up, but we pretty much had everything we wanted anyway. Excuse me? You pretty much had everything you wanted anyway, and you make a big deal of interviewing the president in person, and you know there's no collusion? How do you explain that?
We ought to get into the weeds a little bit of this to show the extent of the cooperation. When Trump had meetings in which Don McGahn, his White House counsel, was involved, and there were a lot of them. They're in the Oval Office, they're sitting there, a number of other officials as well. McGahn is there. A woman named Annie Donaldson was also there. She was McGahn's chief of staff.
All right, we're going to continue this, and I want to get into the weeds when we return. Ladies and gentlemen, don't forget